Welcome to the Garage Grit Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Herlock of AA Shop Marketing. Our hope is to unite shop owners to tackle common stress points and challenges that they're experiencing within the auto repair shop space. Our mission is to guide you towards the best solutions for your shop. So tune in, join the conversation, and let's move your business forward. Hello, I'm Brad Herlock of the Garage Grit Podcast, and I'm glad that you're here. We've got a great topic today about training your team, and we've got a great panel to talk about this. I think that this topic is connected to the last topic from the previous episode about retaining that top talent. Even the top professional ball players in the MLB, they have a batting coach. And they could teach how to bat, right? Absolutely. But they actually have a batting coach to fine-tune their process, to keep getting better. And when we think about that, and we're talking about retaining that top talent, this actually might play into that. We have three different shop owners. We've got Thomas from Colorado, Darren from Oregon, and Scott from New York. Without further ado, let's meet our panelists. Let's go through and learn a little bit about them, and then we'll get into the topics. Thomas, how about if you start us off?
Fantastic, Brad. Thanks for having me here. Obviously, I'm in Mile High and have 4 auto repair shops as part of the organization. Hotchkiss Auto is the one we're going to be talking about today, as it has some fairly advanced training protocols. It's a 13-bay shop, been around for a few decades. Love the team, love the culture there. And I think that's so much part of why we think about training and development as a core part of our organization.
Nice. Darren, how about if you go next?
Yes. So again, thanks for having us as well. We're in Eugene, Oregon. We took over a family business about 20 years ago that my wife's grandfather started, and it's grown to be 13 technicians out of 15 bays. Training's an interesting topic for us as we have many levels of technicians. So we're very excited about talking today with you, Brad.
Nice. Perfect. And Scott?
So again, thanks for having me here with you guys today. We are in Western New York. We historically were a 4-bay. We rented a back shop to a body shop, and finally had gotten tired of them, so we kicked them out and put in an alignment bay. We're now we take up the whole space of our shop. We're 5-bay. We have 2 mechanics right now. We've been just me, so I'm technically a 3rd mechanic, but trying to get out of the shop when we have mechanics that we trust that are trained up. So it's a good topic for today.
Good. Perfect. All right. So there's so many different training programs out there, from AVI to Napa Auto Tech, and then obviously there's a lot of local schools. Do any of the local schools in your area offer ongoing training, or is it always about just training the mechanics to get them to the point where they're initially ASE certified? I don't know how Apex is actually on the eastern side of New York. Are there local schools on the western side of New York that you're familiar?
So there's a community college here, Midtown Monroe Community College, that does a Toyota, they do a GM, and then they do a general repair, and it's a 2-year basically. There's also a college down in the southern tier near the Pennsylvania border that's directly south of us, Alfred State College at Wellsville, which is actually where I graduated from. I feel they're a little more in depth and teach you the basics of each system, and then how to apply them to any car line, because you have new engineers, they get paid to engineer new stuff. They still have to do the same things, accomplish the same goals. It's 2 years and then you're out. So they don't really have ongoing through either of those colleges per se. They do have, it's called Oasis. We have a large influx of people from other countries that have a background in automotive. So they'll go there to get, not really a degree, but certifications in different aspects. We've had some into the shops at times, and just a little struggle because then it's teaching them English. It's a little hard with them not knowing English, but they have great skills, different aspects of training. You got to keep training all the time, no matter what you need to learn.
And that one's online?
That one is not online. That is in person as well.
Okay.
It's like
all right,
BOCES program.
Darren, how about you? Do you actually leverage any of the local schools for ongoing training?
The closest ongoing program that we have here through the Northwest Auto Care Alliance is up in Seattle. And so they have Automotive Training Expo annually. And we send, I think it was 6 team members last year between advisors and technicians. But in our local area, like Scott mentioned, we have a community college. It's a 2-year program. And then it's pretty much you paid your money and you're out. So the ongoing program is tough to find local.
Do you close your shop for that time period, or do you rotate how you're sending them? You send them in waves every other year?
So we're able to keep the shop open because we have a large enough crew to be able to do that. It's typically based on their enthusiasm to want to go. The players we have big heads. They know what they know. They service cars for doctors and lawyers, and they're smart people because they can do things that those clients can't. To get them to key into training is oftentimes finding that little sliver that they express interest in. When we send the team up to Seattle, we look at classes that they offer. They had an ADAS class this last time. So we sent our alignment specialists up to learn some new things there, new to us things. And so it's not an easy rotation, Brad. It's not as simple as just you're up. I don't want to send somebody that's not going to absorb the information. Seattle for us is a 5-hour drive and a couple of motel rooms. It's about $1,000 a person to send them off for a couple-day class between the room and the class cost. We go to SEMA and there's training available there and there's things that you learn, but it's not cheap. It's an expensive endeavor. So you want people that want to absorb information when you send them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And something that you said about the professional, it made me think of a thought that I had a couple weeks back, which was there are times when I'll hear someone be training on a particular topic, and much like that professional ball player, I feel like I could actually teach this topic. And really what I was thinking was the training for those with the bigger heads on that is we need to find high level training so that they don't feel like it's redundant. That way they, like the batting coach, they're not getting general information. They're actually analyzing that particular batter and that particular, the mechanics that they're going through. And so the top of our talent who want to resist training, maybe we need to find training that actually helps them, like it's so specific to them, helping them take that next level. We might have to sell that idea, but just a regular course might not be enough because they might have the attitude of, I should be teaching this, right? Thomas, please take a turn. Talk about the local education facilities for training. Do they offer ongoing? And then talk about a little bit high level on what you're doing and why all those times you're like, yeah, I get it. So go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, this is a huge topic and one of the most critical, especially given the change of technology and manufacturing that our industry is facing. In terms of local resources, we're lucky to be in a place like Denver, where there's really great educational systems, some trade schools like Lincoln Tech, as well as Emily Griffith. This, however, is tailored more so to that entry-level technician, someone that's out of high school, wanting that trade school experience. Highly valuable was recognizing something like welding. It's a specific skill set that increasingly a lot of technicians don't have. So we partnered with a local community college where they have welding open hours, whether you're an entry level or you've been doing it at an advanced level, doing exhaust systems for decades. You can go into a lab, the organization will subsidize part of that cost, and any technician can build a specific skill set rather than, to Darren's point, of 30 people going into one room of different skill sets and instructor trying to navigate 30 different skill sets. That doesn't work. First off, it's knowing your resources. What I came to realize was within our organization, we might have affiliations with various parts vendors, whether it's Napa as an auto care, whether it's WorldPac with their TechNet program, Factory Motor Parts with Partner Network, right? AC Delco with GM Partner Perks. The list goes on with the number of affiliations a shop has. And I could assure you the vast majority of shops are not leveraging the training that's available to them that they're already paying for. Whether that is online resources and digital coursework, whether that's in-person, virtual resources that might be lunchtime and live, or after hours, weekend session. These are things that many of us shops are paying for that are resources available to us, but many of us have not put the time in to, and our front office staff, so they can refine their skill sets. And so I think the onus is number one on ownership and management. And then to Darren's point, you can give them the resources and the opportunity, but they have to take it upon themselves to invest the time and energy to utilize those resources and assets.
But do they? And I mentioned it that way, and I ask it that way specifically because on a previous podcast, someone was talking about how they actually tie their pay and bonuses to whether or not they get additional training. Does anyone have any kind of pay bonuses or do you actually pay by the hour? And do you also pay for extra pay for training?
Good question. Commonly, no. But when we send them away for a day, we don't dock them that day's pay. So if it's a work day, if it's a Saturday training and they volunteer. So it's a case-by-case basis if you want to look at it that way. But I think when Thomas was talking about trying to put 30 people in a room and train to the lowest common denominator, I met with the main teacher at our local community college, and he explained it exactly that way. If you've got somebody in the room that's got mid-level talent and or abilities, and whether driveway skills, they've been working around cars as a young person, as many of us did, until they teach to the students that need to know the basics. People get bored really quick if it's not the right. You mentioned coaching, and I think many of us owners have coaches, and they look at our situation and what we need and what our staff is doing and what our size is or our experience is. And so that's an excellent point. When you've got a talented technician or a talented newcomer, you put them in the right environment where they're going to succeed. I talked to a shop owner the other day that had a B-level tech, and they were struggled that they weren't doing well. And I was listening to what they were saying, and they were feeding them A-level work all day long. And they're going to not succeed if you don't serve them the right category of information. And so if you know your technician, Thomas mentions we've got through TechNet and AC Delco and whatever, so much available that it's almost overwhelming for us. Imagine for the technician, hey, go do some training, see you later. If we don't handpick some things that are in their skill set or we believe to be, we're probably going to see them fail at that training experience, giving them some specifics. And Thomas mentioned lunch and learns or after hours. So much of that stuff has been recorded in a way that if you can pick the things that are at their skill set, they're probably going to be excited to see more of it because they're seeing some benefit to that. Scott mentioned he's got a fairly small team, but I bet they're not all exactly the same experience level. And so feeding them training at the same level is probably not going to stick as well with one person as another.
Plus, his position, and Scott, please jump in, the idea of sending everyone away for a class is what you are going to have to shut down the shop.
Well, I think first off, you've got to start with us. We start day one in the interview and say, this is required. This is the type of shop we are. I was a mechanic for 30 years. A lot of us grew up as mechanics. So not really knowing the business end. This is some things that I've learned that we're taking in any customer. But are you profitable? Or, is that what's good for business? Okay, there's a technician shortage. I need anybody. I just need a pair of hands. You really need more than that to be a successful shop. So you need the buy-in and you need to set expectations. And that's what we're starting to get good at. Although it's taken us 10 years to find our lead mechanic who's B+A and he really wants to learn. And we've had guys come in self-taught. So just when we hold on to people too long, it's just me. I have a problem just getting rid of people. I'll give them a little more time and a little more tools. But you got to get them out and get people that are receptive to that learning and the training. Mm-hmm. So it comes down to that buy-in from day one, setting the expectations. Also talking about finding things that the guy is just specific for them for training. And that, boy, I could train this. This is something I know so well I can train. Well, that's somewhere where you give them buy-in or you get buy-in from them by saying, okay, and you can have that in-house training. Plus, then you're giving responsibility to the older techs to say, okay, I'm part of this learning plan. So it being that there's so much out there, we're an ATI shop, it's Automotive Training Institute out of Baltimore. They have a ton of training, a lot for us. And for the front of the house, more in their curtailment, they're adding a lot for the technicians because they see that the need. So talking about online too, we use a lot of Motor Age and everybody too.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Motor Age magazine, they have instructors and they have videos. A lot of guys, and I've done it too. How the heck do you get to these bolts or what's going on with this situation? And so we'll Google it. We're making our own kind of YouTube page for the shop. And then we add videos for certain trainings into that so that now we're building our own library for different information. Where Napa Auto Repair Shops, they have training around town, half days, once a month. It is hard. Our main mechanic was going for advanced electronics. I'm a tech, so luckily we don't have to shut down or curtailed a little bit. That's really our plan of attack is, well, you have to learn. We learn. My wife and I are going to training all the time, meeting with 20 groups. I meet with a local 20 group through Napa BDG. It's awesome because then we need to be training too. We need to learn. We don't know everything. No one knows everything. So get out there and be the person that is the sponge and wants to learn. If you don't want to learn, then this isn't the shop for you.
Good, Thomas.
I'll comment on the part you said about compensation. One of the challenges I see in this industry is that compensation, not in everyone's shop sitting in this group, but it's tied to like flat rate production hours, or I sold X number of jobs and I'm getting a commission or dollars based on GP, gross profit dollars. And I think those are perfectly fine as a mix of how compensation goes. But in my organization, everyone has eligible discretionary bonuses, whether it's weekly or monthly. Discretionary bonuses are up to management, and it's based on training, based on attitude, based on attendance, based on how well people are going above and beyond. And so training is not one of those formula things in our organization that people are compensated on, but certainly we grade it. We have a senior manager responsible in our organization to sit with every single technician and staff member and to create a training plan for the quarter. And at the end of any performance period, they're given a grade on how did they execute the program that was tailored to them. And their discretionary bonus will be impacted by their ability to execute and develop on themselves. Do I want compensation to be the sole motivation for training and development? No, I frankly think it should be secondary. However, in addition to that self-motivation, wanting to get better, be better for the team, I think having some sort of financial incentive plays a part in the equation.
All right. Darren and Scott both kind of grew up around or has decades of actual hands-on turning wrenches experience. Thomas, I don't believe you do. You came from more of a business background. If somebody doesn't have that particular background and they're trying to come up with a rigid schedule, because it sounds like you've got a very well documented, okay, here are the check boxes. Here's what you need to learn. And it might even change based on each mechanic. That takes some organization. It takes some planning. How did you go about actually developing that system and putting it into play?
Yeah, great question, Brad. Let's be clear. It's something that last year we rolled out, and part of it is you have to hire excess management resources, which I know in this industry, we tend to be very shy to have excess capacity in our organization. But the reality is when you start thinking about HR, marketing, other functional responsibilities in an organization that go beyond ordering the parts, interacting with the customer, those things do require additional management attention. So it starts with having that excess management capacity. Then number two, it's what I mentioned earlier about knowing what your resources are and having training and development be part of the culture of the organization. Scott mentioned that as part of the initial interview. This is required. I tell everyone I interview that personal and professional development are core values of our organization. If you can't be on board with both, then you're not going to fit the culture of our organization. So I think it starts with having the right resources, the right culture, and then being able to execute on the assets you have available and being able to have the meetings and make time for those meetings and hold your people accountable to moving forward. So we're certainly not perfect in what we're doing, but we decided we're going to stop just thinking about it and put something in action.
And Scott mentioned, I think it was Scott that mentioned some of the online, because you were pulling together your own library on YouTube. But there are organizations that actually just deliver online training, right? AVI On Demand and others. Are there others? How many others are there? There's probably dozens. I know there's some courses on Udemy. What are some of your favorite online, already structured, already stamped approval? And then following that question is, I'm going to follow up with, how are you making sure so they can't go to Seattle but this person needs to learn this. And so you need to take this 1 hour course. Darren, did you say you were setting up a facility for training?
No, we did not. My background is actually more like Thomas's. I'm not the hands-on in the shop guy. I know my way around a car from our work experience, 20 years of owning the shop. But my father-in-law, we took over from, was a master mechanic. His father-in-law, Joe, was a master mechanic. So I jumped in more at the business level. From a training standpoint, we have a shop foreman that does a lot of mentoring with our technicians that need that more entry-level help. But yeah, my background is more in the business aspect. And Scott mentioned being an ATI shop. That's our background as well. Jim Bennett with ATI has done training and has ongoing classes. So yeah, like you said, they're almost unlimited amount. And where Thomas mentions, we just need to take advantage of them and dial them in. We're at a TechNet shop as well through the Advanced Auto Parts. They do local classes for us, which is part of the ongoing training that maybe we didn't get to. But as long as you're a TechNet shop, then you're invited to go to those local classes that come up every couple months. And Napa has them. And the other auto parts stores do a tremendous job of shoving training at us if we accept it and we do something with it.
Okay. And so you're doing some online?
Oh, yeah. We do a tremendous amount of...
And how is that structured? You have a dedicated space for them to go and do it, or do they just have to do it on their own in their own time?
We have both available, but we actually have a space within our shop area that's an office area away from everybody, so they can sit and do those classes without being... The interruption at the shop is a very high level of interruption. There's always commotion going on as big as our shop is. So they have a designated space that they can do those online classes.
Yeah, so even designating like a 10 by or even an 8 by 6, basically a little bit larger than a closet. They'd say, this is the training room, and go in here with an internet connection and take the course and check it off when you're done. Because Scott, if they're watching YouTube videos with the hood up, there's too many other distractions, right?
Yeah, so that's a real everyday struggle for us, not really having that space right now. Actually, I was part of that body shop, and we put the alignment rack in there and our compressors back there, so we don't have that dedicated space right now. We have our office, and then our front desk is right there, so it's a struggle, and that's what I'm actually doing, marking this space. I've got to tear stuff down and build walls to this morning, taping it out. All right, how big is this going to be? And it's going to double as their locker room, and we run a place where they can eat lunch. But yes, you got to have that space away from everybody else that they can not be distracted and focus on learning and not everything around them.
Yeah. Okay. So Thomas, you probably have somebody who is saying, here is this mechanic's skill sets and here are the missing pieces. Are you finding those courses for them and saying, this is the course you need to take online?
I am personally not, but between the manager of any respective shop in consultation with our senior manager that's helping tailor the training to the technician, they are making a determination. The technician is being asked, where do you feel like you have deficiencies? Yeah. What are your areas of interest? For example, a lot of technicians have no interest in learning about EV and hybrid systems, whereas others find it exciting, and especially some of the younger ones think this is critical for them to become an ATech in the future and be prepared for where some of the industry is going. Understanding, we're not telling them what to do, we're consulting a group and saying, what do we think is in your best interest for the shop and for the technician, him or herself?
Some shops could be doing it as simple as go to AVI On Demand and pick a course and have it selected by the end of the week. And you're going to watch it the following week. And we're going to document which ones you've done so that you can't just pretend to be watching the same one over and over again.
Right. We are actually selecting the courses in consultation with the immediate supervisor, the technician, and the training manager.
But that's part of that buy-in, right? What do you want to learn? What interest potentially would be of interest to you? And they probably needed to be poked and prodded when they're at the top of their game already because they think that they know everything.
I'll defend some of my highest level technicians.
Okay.
That many of the ones that are the master A-level technicians got there because they had some level of humility and they continue to invest and train in themselves. So sometimes those are the ones that are the easiest to push to training, whereas the B-level techs that have capability, but they haven't really hit the mark yet, sometimes those are the guys that need to be pushed a little bit extra. The ego needs to be shrunken, the humility needs to expand, and they need to be taught hunger is really important in training and development. You have to stay hungry, and you can't be hungry if you're not hungry.
Darren, you nodded your head.
When we were talking about sending technicians to training, we make it a requirement when they come back from training in Seattle, the Automotive Training Expo up there. They all go to different classes, but when they come back, then we have a team meeting with everybody, including the advisors, and we have them share for 5 or 10 minutes some key points about that training and what can they share with the rest of the team as to how that's important to our shop or to the other team members. And so they're needing to pick on some nuggets that come out of that class. So we actually had so many people that went to the training, we couldn't make it into one lunch and have everybody take their 5 or 10 minutes. So we've been able to spread that out and actually extend that training that they went to in Seattle earlier this year.
That actually solidifies the training. My son hates this exercise that we do, but he's in elementary school and I tell him, what did you learn from school today? And my attitude on that is, in part, if he can repeat it back to me, then he actually learned it, right? Like that's the key. And then actually that cements or solidifies that actual knowledge base. Occasionally he'll say, I didn't learn anything. I say, you tell your teacher tomorrow that you're not allowed to come home until you've learned something. He chuckles at that, but he's never actually said that to a teacher. I saw you nod your head a few different times as well. You want to jump in, please?
So it was more that the comment about you can't learn if you're not humble. That really resonates. And I tell my guys all the time, one of the most important things you can learn is know what you don't know. All right, try and figure it out. Just don't drop everything and run and ask somebody for help. Try to figure it out. But then there's a certain point where you're not getting it. It's a time that you save by knowing what you're doing or finding that help. So now you're at a point where you're wasting time. If your ego is keeping you from getting more training or asking for help, then you're not being productive, and you really need to be humble and say, okay, I can't figure this out. I need some help. Someone please teach me, or this is an area where I need more training. And that impresses me more. I'll tell them all the time. It doesn't impress me that you're wasting an hour trying to figure something out, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, if you're really stuck. And then that impresses me more as you drop the ego and say, okay, I don't need this. I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. And then that's a learning experience.
With two techs, do they actually complement each other and train each other from time to time? Let's talk a little bit about on-the-job type training in addition to these formal programs. What does everyone have in place to try to learn as you go, but actually use the top technicians to share knowledge with others, right? So Scott, go first.
And it also goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about earlier as far as dangling the carrot or incentivizing everybody to want to learn or get smarter. So we will pay for training. If they go to training, we're going to pay them. But it's also getting them to understand that they're going to make more money when they can do something, be more proficient. So that's where we dangle the carrot. We got a profit sharing where we tell them this is exactly where you pay for yourself. There's a certain amount of time or hours that you turn where you're going to pay for yourself. This is the number that you're shooting for. And then we need a cushion so we can make some money after you pay for yourself. And then the next tier, you're going to get more money. So if you're smarter, you do things faster, you're going to make more money. So that's where training comes in as far as dangling the carrot. But we also are a team system so that they are also incentive to help each other out. There's got to be team building going on. There's got to be camaraderie and personalities that get along where they're not afraid to, their first stop is, okay, hey, have you seen this before? Can you help me out? They need to be there for each other. So yes, that's their first stop. If they can't figure it out, then they're asking each other. And our second mechanic is 3 weeks in, but he's coming along quickly and they're getting along better with the writer.
Okay. And we were just talking about the ongoing training, on the job training, and actually also leveraging your bench to train each other. How does that go about, and is it happening, and is it documented? Darren or Thomas, you want to jump in or ask questions as far as what Scott's doing? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in. We've been blessed to have a variety of technicians. There's 13 different technicians in the building, and they have pockets of expertise, even the lesser trained or newer to the industry technicians. And so everybody knowing where those pockets of information can come from. So if you're stuck with something, you can jump over to that person and ask them for help. We do have a shop foreman that'll come in and fix the problem. I don't want somebody to ask for help every 5 minutes. If you train them that from the beginning, they will have trouble finding their own way. So you get those people that are tugging on your shirt sleeve all day long with, I don't know how to do this. How do I find this tool? What do we have a shop tool? Who do I go to for this? And it's okay. Part of the reason we have a shop foreman is that they can't come to me with technician questions. That's not my background. They are trained to not come to me and ask about how to fix a car. I'm like, I do my job, and that's why I hired you, is to do your job. So if you can't get there easily, go find a team member that can, or we can find the online resources that we can. But it's nice to have even your mid-level technicians will be approached by one of the other technicians. Hey, I need some help with this. I think you just did one of these the other day. Or if it's an EV, because we've got a couple of people that have excelled at that, and everybody grabs onto that with enthusiasm. So having the entire team have their specialty that they can share has been, I think, a big bonus for us, because we've got enough team members to have a lot of different backgrounds. It also gives our front counter, Scott mentioned, as advisor, working well with the technicians. When your advisors know that you've got a variety of different talent, not just levels of talent, but just a broader width of backgrounds and knowledge. So-and-so was at a Chrysler dealership for a couple of years, and this person was at a Mazda 4 dealership for a while, and this person's GM certified before they came to work for our independent shop. Those are huge things to know at the counter to sell to customers as a benefit to working with your shop. Just sharing that knowledge around about what is the experience within your building. And whether it's 2 team members or 12, everybody knowing what everybody else is bringing to the table can have huge value. It also has worked for us in a sense that if somebody thinks of a class that might fit a particular technician well, oftentimes it's the A-techs looking toward the B and C level players going, hey, I think so-and-so could use a how to do inspections video, because they do inspections, but they don't really seem to know what they don't know. And so let's get them into a video training or a class about how to do better inspections.
Do you have a particular online library or company that you use for that, or is that a YouTube search?
We actually have a variety of online libraries that we subscribe to. We're fortunate to be grown a large enough shop and enough money invested in resources through AC Delco, through TechNet, through Jim Bennett's classes with ATI. We have a number of different training opportunities.
Okay, got it.
I think that's a great point too, Darren. Not just the training for how to fix a system, but the different backgrounds of the different manufacturers and those engineers, and how the heck are they doing this, especially electrical systems, and you got CAN bus and you've got module. So having people with that certain experience, guys that spend a lot of time at Euro or domestics, that's such an important aspect of repairing cars too, is you can know systems, but you have to have the background with the certain vehicles, and even what nuts and bolts are they using, which sockets am I grabbing for my cart. Oh, what's a cart? I got a cart, but I never use it. Bring the tools. So the little things that the new guys don't know is to have everything there and prepared, and you can do it faster. And so knowing those car lines is important.
If you share with your whole team what your technician's comfort level is and where they've experienced new training, that's important from in our world, the front counter. What can the front counter expect out of the team? Or maybe we do have somebody that has that talent. And so when our technicians are doing training, to share with the advisors what their new things that they've learned or that they've expanded on their training. Again, the whole team needs to know that. And a key thing in our particular world is we have a person whose main job is dispatching the work from the front counter into the back shop. And if you don't dispatch the work, hopefully, I'll hand something over to somebody as a dispatch that isn't in their comfort zone maybe, but I'll point to the technician that probably has that comfort zone. So they can, if you just give them stuff that's easy in their world all the time, they'll never expand as a technician either. So if you give them something, I think this will stretch your abilities, but you can rely on this person or this person within the team to help you out. It doesn't mean I can pay 2 technicians to do one job. That's a very difficult financial model. You've got to be able to do your own work. But if you would need to pull them in for 5 or 10 minutes, we actually built into our point of sale system a technician helpline, to where if another technician jumps over and helps that technician, they can actually get credit for the time they spend. So if it's more than that 5 minutes of pointing them in the right direction, they're actually having to go in there and spend half an hour showing them how to do something new. That's good for us. That's on-the-job training. But that other technician that's spending that 20, 30 minutes, they get credit for the time on the work order, so that's helpful for them. Because at the end of the day, it's like Thomas saying that we're grading everybody and we're having to incentivize them. I can't ask the senior technicians to take away as flat raters a lot of time and expect that to go over well with the younger people if I don't find a way to put their time on that work order. It doesn't mean I'm charging the customer for 2 technicians in that moment, but I can definitely give them their half hour, their 5/10 on that work order. And it's actually called shop foreman. And then we'll put whoever's name into that line we need to for that day. Most of the time, 80% of the time, it's the shop foreman. But the other 20% of the time, it may be a different team member that becomes the foreman of the moment that is helping that other team member with the direction on that work order. So that's been a big deal for us recently, recognizing that they need recognized for their time that they spend helping one another.
One thing that I'll add is a real important differentiation of where the industry's been versus where it's going. Everything we've talked about in this conversation as it relates to training and development has been about fixing cars, taking care of customers, the things that we think of, okay, those are the training subject. But critically moving forward, the training and development subjects need to expand beyond that to things like culture isn't just asking the question, Scott mentioned this, will you do training and development? Or being able to say periodically, here's our core value. You actually have to do training and development around culture. So in our shop, every couple months, we have Team Building 101, where I make it voluntary for the team, but obviously it says something for those who show up versus don't, to read certain books that impact how we operate as individuals, how we operate as a team. For example, Who Ate My Cheese is a classic corporate America book about change and how we as individuals and colleagues react to different circumstances of change. And in an automotive repair shop, there's constant change of personnel, change of vehicles, change of standard operating procedures, changing vendors. We also did things like Myers-Briggs and doing personality assessments so that we can sit around a room and say, here's what makes us a little bit different as individuals. These 2 different personality types might be likely to clash because of how they operate. It's not a value judgment of one being better than the other. It's actually lifting the blanket and being able to say, here's who we are as people. And that creates a certain level of trust and intimacy among a team that can then deal with healthy conflict. And I say all of this because culture doesn't just happen. You have to be intentional about it. And that is a critical part of training and development. And if you can get that part, then we get back to your point of on-the-job training being highly effective because you have team members that can be vulnerable. They can be honest with each other. They're looking to build each other and not break each other down. You can mitigate that and really bring out the best in people. And culture is just as critical to retention as training and development programs on how to fix a car or how to take care of a customer.
And what size operation do you think is best for that kind of, does that fit Scott's size shop?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, you're saying. Okay. Aaron's right, I said too. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, it has to. If you want to be successful, you have to have the right building blocks. Just like in construction, you have to build the walls to build the foundation for the walls. And that has to be with culture and fundamentals. And we've taken a page from ATI and come up with our own mission statement and fundamentals. And that goes in day one with their interview and what we're about here. These are the things that we hold true and dear. And these are the things that we expect out of you. And this is how we see things. It really doesn't matter how big or small you are. In my mind, I think that's, again, why we're here. So we bought into this to establish business. And when I came in as a partner, I'm like, all right, so how we doing? What are the numbers? Yeah, pay the guys flat rate. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the numbers. It'll all work out. The reason he got out, and he's an old school owner, is he didn't care, didn't think it was important to focus on these things. And today, these are all the things that matter. Everything we're talking about with the culture and the buy-in and the training, and these are important to us. And that's why we're having a conversation. It doesn't matter the shop, the size of the shop, really. If you want to be successful, you have to work at it.
Okay, so we talked about training the mechanics as far as the skill sets to fix cars. And as Thomas pointed out, we need to do training on the culture and the atmosphere and working with people, because some people have even stated that the cars are just an excuse to work with people. We're all in the customer service business, right? And what about processes? What kind of training is everyone doing? So you roll out a new DVI platform, and now all of a sudden everyone else has to. I was talking to someone the other day who was saying that they love that they get a video, not just a handful of pictures, which is pretty standard in most DVI, but they actually get a video walkthrough of during their oil change, right? Because oil change is now synonymous with I'm going to inspect your entire car at 70 some different checkpoints. Let's talk a little bit. Let's not go too deep into the DVI conversation as much as just what are we doing for software training to make our shop and our team more efficient?
I'll add something real quick along with the training that just hit me as well. You're talking about an oil change, and we're excused to do our 70 point, whatever, call it a courtesy check here. But we maybe something a little bit later to talk about is training your customers. This is how it's going to be. We're not going to, do a 10-minute oil change. If you want that, there's a place down the road for that. That our oil change or New York State inspection is an hour and a half. And trying not to get people, so we don't take waiters as much as we used to. We got one in the morning, first thing, and then one first thing in the afternoon. And we're a 4-day-a-week shop, 7:30 to 6, so no Fridays. So Thursday afternoon, there's no waiter either. It's just those people don't want to spend money. They want to get in and get out. And you got to have your processes in place as far as estimates and exit scheduling and things like that to be profitable. But there's training the employer, training customers too.
No, I like that. Let's talk real quick about what we're doing to train our front desk to train the customers. Thomas, you're nodding your head. What do you got?
One thing that I found unfortunate, let's say, if I look back across the last many years, we overwhelmingly have 5-star reviews. All of the shops in the organization I have the pleasure to run have extraordinary reputation. But then I ask myself, when we occasionally don't have a 5-star review, what is it? What is a common factor across nearly every single one? It's a first-time customer.
Setting expectations.
And the fact that they're a first-time customer says that they probably don't know our processes, our procedures, how we operate, our hours of operation, when and why we communicate. We know we deliver a high level of service and hospitality to our customers, especially repeat customers. Then we need to focus on how to make the customer experience more transparent and clear for that first-time customer. So we have this first-time customer orientation, couple pages, and it says, no different than a new employee in a sense. Here's who we are. Here's our mission. Here's our objective. Here's our values. Here's how we plan to operate on your car. To Scott's point, every vehicle that's coming in that we haven't looked at in X period of time is going to get a digital vehicle inspection. It's going to be sent to you. We're going to make suggestions on what you can do in the future in terms of repairs. Don't take that to mean we're saying you need to do this now. And so it lays the groundwork for an honest exchange before a customer's coming into the shop with baggage and expectations and fear of an automotive repair shop. So you're able to disarm that and also give them an understanding of, here's how we operate. If that's not aligned with what you need, then respectfully, then there's other shops that might be better aligned with you.
Is that document, is it 2 pages? Is that a piece of paper and you hand it to them?
We make it a point to email it to them before they even show up in the shop. When they make an appointment.
Is it video?
No, we could make a video in theory.
I got to tell you, I think a video would be, if you actually tried to watch or pay attention to, so you could do this as a test. You could actually put that 2-pager as a back-end page on your website and then put a link in the email and track how often paying attention to it. And I bet you it's next to nothing. All right. Whereas if you do a video or even an audiobook type setup, I can just listen to it. I don't have to watch per se. It's probably what, 3 minutes, 2 minutes? I bet you your watch rate would go through the roof.
And it's probably not bad from SEO traffic standpoint, right?
No, it wouldn't hurt. Darren, what about you?
When Thomas was talking about doing personality tests, one of the greatest things that we ever got from some owner training was my wife and I doing a personality test to understand our personality, but to better maybe understand their personality. We work together. Maybe many of the shops have husband-wife team or partner of some sort. As you know your employees better, to Thomas's point, if you know your customers better, you know your customers' personalities. You've got some customers, I used to bucket them in 3 different buckets when I was the main person at the counter doing the advisor selling part. And I would have the third of the customers that didn't really care what it took. They were longtime customers. They just wanted it fixed. They wanted to call when it stopped. And then you'd have a third of the customers that were new and they needed to understand the shop environment before they just say. And then the third in the middle was the people that kind of had budget issues. They didn't want to say yes until they knew the budget. But if you knew which bucket they were in, it helped your flow in the shop a lot better. And as we have larger shops or advisors don't know the customers one-on-one, we used to think we did. If you don't know the personality of the advisor or the technician to plug them into training, I know an excellent trainer happens to be with ATI, and my wife's personality and his personality absolutely don't blend. He said something one day that shut her down, and she will not sit in a class with that person. And it's just, holy smokes. Now that we know that, I know to not suggest classes to her that have that particular, just like your technicians. You have certain technicians, if you have a large enough organization, they'll work well with others. They'll hang out together. They'll do things after work together. And other times I'll do the minimum to help them out, but it's just not my personality. So when you talk about culture, it's not as easy as just everybody's going to get along. It doesn't really work that way. Same with customers. And when Thomas has proposes that some customers just may not be the right fit for your organization, it's often way too late in the conversation to find that out. Thomas mentioned it's almost always new customers. For us, I would say our reviews that are not stellar are always communication issues. Always. What was the expectation? Back to training customers. If we tell them we're going to get them an update by 10 o'clock, we better give them an update by 10 o'clock. And then they're sitting at home or their office. You got the husband or wife going, hey, did you get that update from the shop yet? They haven't called me. Now they're both anxious and on edge in the expectations. So the training. But if you have your advisors tell them something, follow through and make sure that communication is clear. If you don't know anything, there's probably nothing wrong with calling a customer to let them know. Your car hasn't got all the answers given up yet. It's still hiding some secrets. Or the technician that I want to work with your car, on Scott's instance, I've got my new guy out there and it's just not coming to that easy. I need to get my senior team member on the car. It's going to take me a little bit longer. And as a customer, what I just heard was, I want the senior team member. I'm willing to wait a little bit longer for that. Training everybody as to what their piece of the equation is. Even the customer's piece of the equation is a huge part of that. I was listening to a book about job environments recently on a audio book, and it was discussing how does your particular position in the organization affect other people. I think we all think about it as customers and cars and helping customers. But if I'm an advisor and I can do a better job writing the ticket up, I'm trained better. Is it going to help my technicians know what they're looking for, that noise, that problem, that customer's concern? And if I'm a technician and I make good notes on my inspection, I took a picture of the ball joint that was bad. You should have known that. If you note that it's on the lower left instead of I can order the right part. So how can my job affect another person's job? And how can they be better trained to know how they blend together to make a more seamless experience for the customer? So yeah, there's so many facets that if we spread ourselves too thin and don't concentrate on any of them, we're probably not going to make any headway. But if we focus on one at a time, I think there's some great opportunity for all of our shops to improve, for shops listening to just think about all the different things we have available and utilize something. I had a great mentor many years ago that looked at me one day and he said, just do something even if it's wrong. I was very young and didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. Just do something, even if it's wrong, be doing something. As a technician, you do something wrong and you're breaking parts and costing the shop money. So you got to balance that out where they're not too eager to break stuff. But if you've hired talented people, that's not going to happen. They're going to know when to cry uncle and jump in and get some help.
It's interesting. You were saying about training your team as far as how is what I'm doing going to affect someone else's performance, right, inside that team, right? And in your situation, you actually exampled the DVI, the pictures and whatnot. Let's actually now move back to the software training or the process training. What are we doing or how often are we rolling out or retraining them to improve their use of these digital tools that we have at our exposure, right? So what are you guys doing? What's going on? How are you training people on software?
For us, I don't mind jumping in on one of them, for example. What I realized is sometimes the organization just expects the owner or the senior manager or whoever it might be to become an expert at something, and it goes from the top down. One of the things that's really important in our organization, and we tried this recently with an online scheduling tool, where we brought the idea out to everyone. And I had already demoed it, so I had a sense of it's something we should do, but I let it be a little bit of a democratic decision. But then I identified a junior service writer to say, I want you to demo this. I want you to get to know it, be familiar with it, see if it aligns with our systems and our existing processes. And then I want you to work with another service advisor to also, now I want you guys to collaborate on it. So part of it is buy-in. I think one of the challenges, and many of us had this with DVI systems, when we first had DVI system years ago, 6 to 9 months went by and no one used it. And it wasn't really enforced. It was there. It was optional. And the challenge is that was a decision made from the senior level of the company that was pushed down, and there was some training, but we all fear having our technicians being irritated or our service advisors not wanting to do something different because that it's hard for them to take a step back during the day and do training. But if you empower them to make decisions, and certainly as senior management and ownership, you can help drive those decisions. But if it's not viewed as something authoritarian, now it's their decision, they take ownership of it, and now their desire to see it work is much higher. And that is part of the motivation then to train for it, find the deficiencies in it, understand the gaps in it. And if that's where ownership and management should be supportive of new technology and training rather than heavy-handed and just mandating that this is what we're doing next. And that's a little bit of sort of people management, process management that I had to learn over the last year.
And so you made somebody else be the owner, if you will, of that particular software, and they were the go-to person if somebody had questions about that piece. So that's interesting. And you even had before, I'm sorry, what online scheduling tool are you using?
AutoOps.
AutoOps. Before you actually signed on with AutoOps, you actually had somebody test run it themselves to get that buy-in. That's interesting. Darren, how about you? What software implementation or training are you doing?
We also use AutoOps, and that was also something that we had to roll out delicately. It's a learning curve. It doesn't just plug and play. You've got to put limitations and boundaries on it. At TechMetric, when we moved to TechMetric a couple of years ago, I like the cloud-based format. I like that I can access things from my laptop I'm sitting on from 3 states away. So there's different purposes to why I liked TechMetric. But it also allowed, we use their DVI. It's just simple and easy because it's right there. That's one challenge with our organization, as many bodies as we have. When we make a small change and you try to get everybody's not only buy-in, but to train everybody how to use something new. So it's streamlined processes for us, but it does give all of the technicians and all the advisors a lot of simplification. When we used to have paper work orders and you had 13 different technician notes and ways to find notes and ways to read notes, now it's a lot simpler for that to end up on the advisor's desk in a way that they can see it. The technology piece for us has been a huge streamlined, in all of those training program within TechMetric, for example, you can train yourself on your parts person can train on that, the dispatch person, the job assignment, all of our point of sale systems have so much training built in that if we just slow down and utilize a few of those short 2-minute videos, we'll gain a tremendous amount. But one thing that I like about our current point of sale system is that they do continually roll out new features. A lot of the point of sale systems we've used in the past, being there 20 years, it goes back to there's been a handful. And they just weren't growing with the times, or it didn't appear that they were growing with the new technology and orchestrating a DVI within your point of sale system that isn't 2 different companies and you're paying 2 different. It may not be the best in the world, but the fact that it's simple and it's already built in for our organization was super helpful. We didn't have to do a high level of training. It's ongoing. And if one of our less experienced employees comes to us and says, hey, I learned this about blah, 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 they can show everybody in the organization what they've learned about how to use that online scheduler. AutoOps, I think, is great. It's been fabulous for us. But even in TechMetric, they watch one of the videos and they go, oh, did you know I can do this? And they come to me and show me things. And I'm looking at them like, that's really cool. You have to be very humble to take one of your entry-level staff or less experienced staff and go, wow, you learned that. That's great. Sometimes you may know what they've learned, but maybe they've learned it a new way and you still want to absorb that information in a way that they want to feed it back to you next time they learn something. That's fun to watch them share with you something new to them, even though you are perceived as a senior level employee, that they are, that you're approachable and they can come to you and teach you something.
Scott, you wanted to jump in as well.
So as soon as the DVIs, we heard about DVIs, we really liked it, like the openness and the information. So we had Mitchell 1 at the time and got Bolt-On, which we loved. And again, at the time, our mechanics were self-taught, a few years of experience. They gave us some struggle. Finally, they saw the benefits of it. Some people will pay for that. Their mechanics, we don't pay them to do it, but they see the benefits. And then with people that are coming back and just the reviews from people saying, hey, this is the best thing since sliced cheese. I can't believe I've got all this information sent to me.
Using Bolt-On?
No. So then now we're gone. So we like the cloud-based as well. So we went to TechMetric. It's just within 4 days, I was ready to go back. I can't do this. My wife's, please just give it a couple more weeks. It's been great and we love it. So then we got rid of those mechanics, one, because they really didn't have the buy-in. They wanted to drive the car when they should be listening. By that time, we've already had this positive feedback. We get new people in, and this is how we do it. People love it, and this is what you're going to do. This is how we do it. These are our processes. It wasn't something, it was new for them, but it wasn't new for us. And that was just our procedure. So when they start, okay, day one, first car, this downloading the software to their phone or giving them a tablet to be able to use the platform that we're using. So it was a little bit easier with new people. And we've had, again, great feedback, and ARO is up, and just everything about it when properly used. And so it's been training from day one. That was our culture, and this is what we do, and this is how you're going to do it. And there's also the buy-in, it's a work in progress. There's so many, you can add so much to it. If you see that you're typing words, then give me those words, and then we can put it in as a drop down, so it saves time. But
you actually use the keyboard? I thought everyone just used voice recognition these days.
No, we're not using voice recognition.
I don't know about inside the Techmetric, but in general, I often am using voice recognition. Now, I do find you have to edit it. You do have to pay attention, because they don't necessarily... Sometimes I use that as maybe I'm not enunciating correctly.
It's scary.
You always need to make sure, because otherwise the text message to your wife is less than desirable. So you have to check. But overall, I think it's a time saver. And probably Google loves it, because they're indexing everything about it. And they're studying us like mice in a laboratory, but we don't need to talk about that.
Right. Funny age then, where I still type on my iPhone my text, whereas now I can text, but I'm not doing the voice text.
The biggest thing that moved to the voice text for me was the need for these. Like, I can't even see the phone anymore. And I always joke about how now I understand why people who are in their 80s are driving so slow. They can't see their dashboard. They don't know their speed.
Right. See, retrain.
Yeah.
And retraining. Right. If you fail to go.
Let's get back to the training. We've talked about the training on the technical side and growing the technicians. We talked about the training on the software side. We also talked about the training of our people about people, right? Not just software processes and how they interact and how they can actually help each other do their job more effectively. Are there any other training the team aspects that we've overlooked that we should try to touch on before we close out?
Something comes to my mind as you mention it that way, Brad. We have negative experiences in our shop, whether it's something we broke, whether it's something we misheard the customer, whatever the circumstances is. You look back, and I use this terminology in my shop, and is this a teachable moment? Is this a training opportunity? So we've already been down the wrong path, and we want to back up and go, okay, we don't want to go down that path again. Calling an audible, if you will. As the day progresses, we'll stop and say, hey, this just happened. We need to have an on-the-moment training, because unfortunately, if you think about it, our next shop meeting, we'll do that next week or 2 weeks. It won't have the same maybe impact as if you can just stop at that moment and regroup with everybody, whether that be a bad review that you're reviewing and go, oh, this just happened. We need to not continue down this path and do this, or a strip drain plug, or whatever the situation is. And you're thinking, okay, well, we fix broken stuff all day long. But if we're in the middle of something that's half broken and we break it the rest of the way, is that a teachable moment? And so in our environment, we tend to try to maximize those teachable moments as they come up. Oftentimes with the newer staff members, we talk about onboarding and having an employee handbook that's 30 pages thick. There's a lot of on-the-job onboarding that's going to happen in our environment. There's no way you're going to plug and play somebody into your organization. Even if you tell them 2 weeks, we're not going to let you touch a car for 2 weeks, and then we'll finally turn you loose to do an inspection. And then it just doesn't happen like that. They still learn stuff on the job as they go by making mistakes, and trying not to slap them upside the head too hard when a mistake happens that you look back and go, gosh, you should have known better. Obviously, they didn't know better, or they wouldn't have done it that way. So recognizing that we need to I keep reminding myself, our team members, whatever level they're at, they don't know what they don't know. One of my most energetic newer team members has been with me a fairly small amount of time. Super appears to have the mechanical aptitude that we'd like all of our team members to have, and that's great. Plows through things like he knows everything. And I remind myself almost daily, I was 18 once. I thought like that once. And having those teachable moments throughout the day has had great value for our organization to slow down and do it at the time it happens, so that we can learn from it and not forget to learn from it later, which oftentimes happens if we put it on the back burner and deal with it later.
One thing I'll add is, I agree with everything Darren said, and taking it a step further of the idea of training and development. Development of individuals is something that I think is actually really important for employers and ownership these days. Having conversations and understanding what are people's sensitive points, even in their personal life. Of course, their personal life is their personal life, and you can't force them to talk about it, but showing a genuine interest in what's going on in their life, what family life. In Denver, for example, one of the issues, it's true here and probably true in a lot of places around this country, where housing prices are just skyrocketing, right? And you have a young couple that's trying to figure out their life and how do they deal with saving money? And whether it's some of my team members that are in their 50s and 60s and later in their professional careers versus the young 20-year-old who doesn't, his first making a decent paycheck the first time in his life, I've offered, I'll sit down and do finance training with you. Let's talk about how a mortgage works, right? Why is it that you're getting paid fairly well, but you're seemingly living paycheck to paycheck? Let's look through your finances. And if that's something that they value, this isn't anything you force upon them. If it's something they value, then you set up for it. And in our organization, things like birthdays and anniversaries, there's things we celebrate. And I'm not saying we need to all sit around and sing Kumbaya, but people want to feel valued. And I think it is critical for ownership and senior management to have that genuine interest in the people beyond their ability to get a good RO sold or fixing a car, because they're part of a professional family. And that is why they oftentimes work at independents, not at a dealership or many box stores. So that's the key differentiating factor that we have as independents. And we need to lean into that, especially with the new age of technicians and automotive professionals that do value those types.
And if you want more on that topic specifically was discussed, or actually a part of it. So Kendall Warnock in the March episode that was released on, I believe, the 26th of March, he talks about how he even basically whiteboards each employee's goals. Like they bring them in and they have that really personal conversation. What do you want to do with your professional and personal life? And then he helps drive them towards that, even within their own, because it's a family type relationship. And it was interesting how much he actually requires that to be part of the culture at his shop, right? Like I said, he's Kendall Warnock of A1 in Nebraska. And that was in the episode that was released on March 26th. Check that out. And because he actually lays out a piece of it, and he's offered, even in that podcast, he's offered, if you want to see how he has it laid out, that he'll share that with you on the live Facebook group that we have. So that's something that's there for others. But I agree that we have that family opportunity. If you're working at a dealership, there are plenty of people who feel like they're just like a number because it's just another body. But if you're in an independent, you've got that family-like atmosphere potentially, or it's an opportunity. And anyway, no, I agree. Okay, so we talked about the people, we talked about the processes, we talked about the employees, the actual technicians, we talked about training the front, we also talked about training on the culture, as we just talked about. What else? Is there other training aspects that we should be talking about? I think we even touched on a little bit on how the owners need to be fine-tuning their personal development, right? Is there anything else that we're overlooking or that we should speak on before we try to wrap up?
I think your comment there, Brad, about training the owner, if we're not all in some sort of a coaching or mentoring or 20 group program or sharing our years of experience or trying to find somebody with years of experience to gain from, we're probably very short-sighted in what we have going on. Think of yourself as somebody needing help or needing to grow, whether that's through reading books or talking to other people that have done something. As we've grown to a pretty good sized shop, I have trouble. Many smaller shops, like if Scott and I sat down, there may be a moment where Scott will look at me and go, gosh, you've done this for 20 years and you've got 20 employees. You're doing well. I will gain so much more from what one little nugget Scott can share with me will make me way more ease of life or dollars in the bank account than maybe it would ever make for Scott in his environment. So there's this thing where I enjoy meeting with shop owners that can share nuggets as to how they work in their environment, regardless of size. The size really isn't a big factor for me, but knowing as a shop owner, there's all kinds of things that we should be trading on. I think it can be helpful for us moving forward and knowing 6 months or 12 months or 18 months from now that we're better people and we have better organizations and people within our organizations.
Touching on
go ahead,
what
Scott.
You guys have said about what drives people, and that the whiteboard and the goal board, it's not, we got to listen, and it's not always money. It might be the helping in that financial, learning how finances work, or they're working towards that house, or maybe they want to learn to skydive or something. So,
Or deal with an addiction.
right. So it's listening and knowing what their goals are and then helping them reach those goals. And also, again, for us in the training, and it is a little bit easier for me to reach all my employees, which I love, and leading by example and sharing with them things that I learn and telling them, I'm going to training, or I'm reading this book, or this had an impact on me, this happened to me, and it affected me in this way. You share those personal things. Leading by example, they're going to share those personal things with you, and you break down the barriers, and you really do get that family atmosphere. And I tell them all the time, if you have problems, you're coming to the owner, or you're in a dealership, you got to go through 2 or 3 levels of management to get to that owner sometimes. So the benefits, showing them the benefits that you care and you're listening and you're investing in them, and you need them to invest in you. But you take the leap of faith first. It says a lot, I think, a lot of times to our internal customers, as they're called sometimes.
And Thomas, I know that we want to jump in on that, and I want you to, but real quick, another thought that you just said, Scott, was making sure that our education journey is transparent to the team. Because we listen to an audiobook, or we might watch a training video, but if our team never actually knows that we're also in a regimented training program or a development program for ourselves, then they might never even experience it. They might hear a new idea that we've shared, but they don't necessarily know that we too are holding ourselves to the same expectation that we're expecting of them. And that makes it easier to lead by examples. Hey, here's my training schedule. That's interesting. Thomas, what were you going to say a moment ago?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I make it a point to communicate to the entirety of the team what I'm doing with training. Maybe not every single book or podcast, but certainly what I'm reading, being part of national automotive owner groups in which we go to site visits, and things that I pull away, I share to my team. Like Darren mentioned, people go to training and they come back and they have to communicate to the team. I make it a point to do that. And I also say very clearly, and I'll challenge anyone in the organization who does more training than me. And I think that is critical. If they're seeing me do it, it shows that level of humility of I'm always hungry to learn more, to find the extra tidbit. We mentioned earlier something like Ottawa. Well, I learned that going to another shop and seeing them operate it, brought it back to the team, then identified, here's why I think this is a good idea. Why don't you guys demo it and make a decision, right? I think it's critical to be transparent, like you said. But the second part I'd also say, and this is something we all agree to that's difficult, as owners of a shop, it is important to realize we don't have job. Ownership is a role within an organization. It is not a job. It comes with responsibility. It is not a job, right? It depends on your legal structures and W-2 income or not. But at the end of the day, there is such a high standard and responsibility for ownership that if we spend too much time thinking of it as a job, we miss out on some of the strategic human resource elements that are critical in growing that organization and keeping the stability underneath it. So I continue to encourage, when the shop closes at X hour and everyone goes home, your responsibility as an owner continues. Your responsibility, if you had a job, ends for the day. That differentiation, I think, is really critical in why we need to make time, regardless of what's going on in our lives, for our own training and development, and be able to communicate that to our team members.
That's it. So do you carve out, I'm going to do training for myself at next Wednesday at 6 p.m.?
For myself,
blocking
I always
time?
have it on my calendar at some point. It's not consistent the same week, the same time, but there's enough opportunities constantly going on that if multiple weeks is going by where I don't have training on my calendar, then that's a red flag. Training is always happening. Sometimes it's too much, but there's always an opportunity to learn. And I feel like when I learn something and I develop in a certain way, it starts with me, and I can then pass that and encourage that to others.
Yeah. So
a lot of my training right
ahead.
now, comes really with this, with talking with other shop owners. I only been a shop owner for 14 years, 25 as a mechanic, but there's so much I see that I don't know. So I can't enforce enough the importance of 20 groups or even just meeting with other shop owners. You're not always no one is doing great in every aspect of the business. You may have some down this month, then have trouble next month. And you're going to talk to people that are in your exact situation that have a little tidbit, like Darren was saying, a little tidbit that's going to help you. Oh, I did think of that at one time, and I forgot it. I meant to implement this.
Yeah.
As far as training, just having open and honest conversations. And we say that a lot with our team, but having those open and honest conversations with other shop owners and being humble enough to say, I'm having trouble here, or I need help. Someone's going to have that answer for you, or at least send you in the right direction. There's always training, formal training, but I've got, again, 2 or 3 groups where we're sitting down and talking and just how are things going? What troubles you having? Who can help out? And who can I help out? I love helper. I tell my daughter, I'm a helper. She doesn't like it all the time that I'm helping so much, but it makes me feel good. It's a little selfish for me because I do it because it makes me feel better, but we're helping other people, and that's part of the training. So I don't think we can't end this without saying that 20 groups are a huge part of training for shop owners.
Okay. I like it. And I like the idea of blocking the time for it specifically. Thomas, you talked about the ownership as a role, but inside of that, you've got all these responsibilities from HR and I'm a big fan of trying to block time. Okay, this is when I'm going to be doing these activities. And as you pointed out, it's not necessarily over at a particular time of the day, right? You got to circle back and get some of those things done. So training is one of them. And also it leads by example that way. You're showing your team that you're also in this process. And I don't think that it's enough just to do it in front of them. I think actually pointing it out might be a benefit because otherwise they might not even notice, right? Have that conversation. Where's your training program? Here's mine. Thomas, when you said you're not going to be out training me to your team, my mind went right to teaching my son to eat more vegetables. I told him he's never going to out spinach me. I'm going to, but also interestingly enough, before he was around, I wasn't eating a lot of spinach because I knew that I needed that for him. I stepped up my game. And I think that applies here too, right? If your team isn't doing enough training, maybe you need to start doing more training for yourself as a shop owner. And then you're actually leading by example at that point. Okay. Well, we've taken a lot of time today talking about this, but it's been a great topic, and I don't want to end it early. If there's other topics or conversations or tips that you want to close on, but maybe that's the right time to go with this. I think training the owners is a good way to be the final topic, but why don't we do a round robin of final thoughts and then we'll move on. Do I have a volunteer? Final thoughts? All right, Darren, you're up.
I appreciate this group and it as a professional, wrapping this all into one, just professional growth. If our employees are growing and we're growing, it's going to grow their families. It's going to grow their partners and our kids. It's all part of us being better people. So thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Scott, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think what I had said just now is, it's your personal journey. It has to start with us as owners. We have to set the bar. We have to set the example. We have to set the expectations and then inspect what we expect. We need to keep up on them and set those times for them as well, that, okay, this is your training. You need to have this done by then, or this is what I expect. But also setting the bar and just generally wanting to learn more every day and get smarter. And then that trickles down, but also demanding that from your employees, but set the example.
Good. Thomas?
I'll step back to the mission of our organization, which is building community in the neighborhoods we serve and within our shops. And when I think about building community, it's something going back to what I said about a core value earlier. It's the personal and professional development of everyone in the organization. And when the organization at all levels is focused on that as a value, then we're getting better as individuals, as a team, as an organization. We're strengthening our community. And what better objectives can you have as an independent small business than to serve your community and better the lives of everyone you serve?
That's great. That's great. Okay. This conversation has gone quite a bit. It almost rivals the February conversation on time management, which was actually almost a little over 2 hours. Yeah, the irony there. The one last thing that I want to ask everybody is topics for future podcasts. So the whole goal here is to have these types of conversations around things that we're going to better ourselves and better the shop owners. Next, couple topics I think have already been penciled in. We're going to be talking about transition. So I'm planning on having a panel of people who are taking over or soon to be taking over a shop. And then the following month, have a panel of people who are about to pass on the shop to another set of hands. And so I think it'll be interesting to watch those two different set of panelists talk with each other. But the topic after that, I've had a handful of different ideas, from how shops are handling loaner cars or courtesy vehicles to how they're actually implementing in detail the DVIs. But what are your thoughts? What are some topics that would be of interest to you? Who wants to go first on that?
I will, so that they don't steal my idea, because there's a good chance that these guys are smart. So I would say attracting and retaining mechanics. Just, it's so hard for both. So what are we doing to attract the top talent, and what are we doing to keep the top talent that we want to hold on to?
Interesting enough, we talked about that once or twice before, but it's a topic that we can always revisit. And Scott, I'd love to hear from you later on. I want to make sure that you've listened to the episode from last month. And then I believe 2 months ago or 3 months ago, we talked about recruiting top talent and retaining top talent. And every single time it came back to starting with ourselves for culture, making sure that you have an attractive place to bring in, and then do a good job marketing that culture.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it's an unknown factor. But I think you're spot on. And I think the next topic around that needs to be more specific for us. I think that's a great continued topic, but I'd love to hear your thoughts after you've checked out those two different podcast episodes, to what was left out and where can we be more specific on a particular aspect of recruiting. And
so now you're giving me homework. I got you.
I'm giving you homework. I'm so sorry.
Glad
but it's a conversation I have almost daily with different shop owners. Yeah. And so it continues to be top of mind. And I feel like if I would have let that conversation also go forever, it could have, right? And maybe pinning down a particular aspect would be of interest. I'd love to hear from you about
Absolutely.
that. All right, who wants to go next? Darren, you up for some ideas? Any thoughts?
Yeah, something that I've gained a ton of traction. I came from a 20 group meeting years ago. There's a book, I can't tell you the author, but the little nugget I got was the one thing. And in our world, there's oftentimes a single thing. For example, if I'm looking at my shop's numbers, if I watch average hours per ticket, that'll affect total ticket. It'll affect profitability on that ticket. That one thing will affect 6 or 7 other numbers that will help us out. Or if the one thing in our shop is a particular team member that's dragging everybody down, maybe the one thing is that focus on that person, and it affects 6 or 7 other things in that layering. So maybe using that one thing, and too often I hear Thomas talk about his different shops and having his managers. You can have so many things that you're discussing and working with that it gets muted to where it doesn't get a lot of traction. You don't get a lot of energy from it. And I've got a lot of energy and traction by picking a item that'll affect other things, but I don't worry about the other things downstream. I just worry about that one thing, and knowing that if I concentrate with my team about our average hours per ticket, whatever number, if it's a numbers thing or if it's a culture thing, what one thing in our culture will affect layering of other things. Because when we talk about we need to work on this and this, and pretty soon we're down to 4 items and we don't concentrate on any of those items. Right. So having a one thing attitude has value in my world and my organization, and it layers to be very valuable multiple times.
Darren, I'm going to give you homework now. If you don't mind trying to recall what that title was or who that author was, I can add that to the resources, or we could post it into the Facebook group. When you first said the one thing, what jumped into my mind was an audiobook. It was the movie City Slickers, where...
Yeah.
Do you okay.
It goes back a ways.
Maybe we'll link out to a video clip of that too. All right, Thomas, how about you?
One that I think about that's really significant for our industry is the impact of mergers and acquisitions. There's been so many financial institutions, private equity firms that have gotten involved, and especially the impact that had on customers right? A number of independent shops are being bought by large private equity firms, roll-up strategies, and what is long-standing local shops that have had a service advisor, service manager for decades are being bought up where all of a sudden they're no longer doing engines or transmissions and they want to sell fluid services and flushes only. And let's just sell more tires because there's some industry strategy around it. It's eroded that sense of the neighborhood shop. And so what does that mean for independents? Some independents ownership might be looking to exit and they might sell to those players. Some might be looking for other independents that are looking to buy and expand their organization. What does that mean for customer? What does that mean for service? What does that mean for trust? Obviously, there's a big difference between a Midas, Meineke, Christian Brothers versus a Joe's Garage, Turner Auto, and Hotchkiss Auto, right? So what does that mean for also employees, benefits, culture? What does it mean as an independent shop if you have one location and you're being surrounded by players that have dozens of locations? What does that mean from a parts vendor standpoint? Are those drivers, are they still going to service your facility the same way? And at the end of the day, isn't that going to impact your service to a customer and also the pricing that you can offer to a customer? The ramifications of financial institutions and consolidation and M&A trend in this industry is going to change the face of how this industry looks over the next few years.
It's going to make the independent shops look more stellar, potentially. They're going to get a lot of pushback on price because they don't have that capacity, but I would think that it's like you said, the community touches. If my mechanic was bought out by a large company, I'd be suspicious on day one.
But many names might stay the same. In theory, Jack's Garage can be bought out by some private equity player and it's still Jack's Garage and the customers don't know any difference overnight, but they might find a difference because the same service manager that was there for 2 decades left. Or because all of a sudden XYZ services or repairs are needed on the vehicle and they're no longer doing that and referring it somewhere else. And all of a sudden there's some new technology and the aggressive selling of certain things that may not have been necessary before became all of a sudden very necessary, that we're peddling products and services that may not be for the benefit of a customer. So that's where there's that old sense of someone walks into a shop and the owner is sitting behind a desk or in the shop dispatching a ticket. That's not the reality anymore. And I think a lot of customers don't recognize that trend is already happening in the industry. And certainly there's a lot of shop owners that have their head in the sand that don't realize there are ramifications to everyone because this trend is going on. And it's issue of, I think you're right, Brad, an independent could be well positioned and manage around this trend. But that doesn't mean they are well positioned and are ready for some of the changes that could happen as this continues to evolve in the industry.
And so that kind of reminds me, in my area, there's a large gas station company called Wawa. And so you're smiling, you're familiar, and they still grow. I've often joked about how it'd be a very interesting challenge to own an independent gas station across the street. A Wawa moves in. How do you redefine your business? Because it was so common for so long, the Wawa became such a staple that the gas station across the street that was a small independent, whatever, even if it was a franchise, is just, they're out of business. They don't last, right? Unless they can redefine themselves to be different from this convenience store / gas station, because people like Wawa for a list of reasons, right? And so there's always a line there. What do you have to do different? And it's like that similar equation. They have all these extra resources that they now have available. And so as an independent, how do you make sure that you shine even more so in your community? One of the topics that was suggested that we're thinking about also doing is a topic on how to be more involved in our community. We are that neighborhood player. And so that this actually would play off of that potentially. All right, great. All right, well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciated it. And there's going to be hopefully there's some conversation in the Facebook group about today's topics. And so, yeah, we have that Facebook group available. We can link to it, show notes, so that you can request to join. It is only for shop owners. And then from there, we're going to, actually, this is a live recording. We're actually going to publish this this following Tuesday. And so please, by all means, check it out and share it with others. That always helps to get the word out that we're trying to help shop owners with these types of conversations. Scott, Thomas, and Darren, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I don't know, I guess that's a wrap. Thank you.